Morning, welcome back to another vinyl vid, my first one for a long time, and I have been very lazy, and I do apologise for all those that do like the vinyl pickup vids, but I've just been busy and, like I say, very, very lazy at times. You put one video off for a day or two, a week goes by and then a month goes by, but I think it's been around about 6 months since I made a vinyl vid, 5 or 6 months, and that's really poor. So from this juncture onwards, what I'm aiming to do is maybe one every 3 weeks, or certainly one a month. That should not be difficult. So, without further ado, I have 6 altogether. That's the view of one of them at the back. If you can guess what that is, just by that, well done. That's impressive. So, the first 2 are by the same band, and it's been 30 years since their debut album. So what they did is they released, I think it's 9 or 10, I may be wrong on that one, but not all of them haven't been re-released or reissued, but 9 or 10, give or take, have been reissued as like a 30th anniversary special because it's 30 years since the debut album. That debut album is Wonderland, and the band is Erasure. Apologies for any glare. I always say it. I've got to nail this camera angle. One day I will, but for now you're going to have to put up with the glare, I'm afraid. So yeah, brilliant album, their debut album. Now I believe, if memory serves me right, I don't think this got an amazing reception when it first came out. I wouldn't go as far as saying it crept under the radar, but it certainly wasn't commercially successful as some of their latter releases, including the next one. But some great tracks on here, such as Who Needs Love Like That, Ola More, Heavenly Action. I mean, it does help that those are the ones that are listed on there to give me a bit of a reminder, because it doesn't say it on the back. So, but yeah, a really strong album, a really good album, and it's absolutely fantastic. So, yeah, 1986 was Erasure's debut album, which is something else. Now, I was only a kid at the time, so I don't remember that coming out. But I do remember this coming out, even though it was only a year later. It's their second album, and it's called Circus. Now, this has got, again, some really, truly great tracks on here. I mean, I'm just looking at, well, in fact, let's look at the front again. So it doesn't have to be Victim of Love, sometimes The Circus, which is obviously the title of the album. So, I think, did I refer to it as Circus a second ago? It's The Circus. So, yeah, 1987 this one came out. And it's funny, isn't it, how we remember certain things. I've got this vivid image of me in the car. I wasn't driving at 7 or 8, but me in the car with, I guess it would have been me mum and me dad and me sister, and we were in a car park, one of these kind of windy car parks. It was in Poole, which is near Bournemouth, for all of you who are familiar with that part of the world, on the south coast. And but yeah, it must have been around about 87, 88, because my dad had this, and it was the cassette version. Obviously, cassettes back then were pretty big as well. And so when I think of this, I immediately get taken back to that memory, which is just absolutely bizarre. So, fantastic album, and I've got to be honest, one of my favourite from the 80s, and one of Erasure's strongest. And they're still going, by the way. 30 years, still releasing good stuff. Their album, I think their latest one came out last year. I haven't bought that one, but I've heard a few tracks, and I think it's really good. You know, it's, for me, good band, good music. Okay, so next up is a band which I don't know a great deal about, or didn't do, until I recently picked up this record, and they're called The Glitch Mob, and the album's called Drink the Sea. Now, the best way I can describe, well, in fact, I won't have to describe it, because I recently heard it described, the kind of music, the genre, as IDM music. And I was like, what the hell does IDM mean? So I did a Google search, IDM. Apparently, it stands for Intelligent Dance Music. That's what they say. Now, it sounds a bit patronising, a bit condescending, really. But yeah, it's basically electronic music, essentially. Now, if you don't like, or if you do like an album with not a lot of vocals on, this is probably for you, because there's only one track. I'm looking on the back, hence my hesitation there. There's only one track which does have vocals, and it's called Between 2 Points. And the vocals are from a female solo artist called Swan. Now, I don't know a lot about her, I've got to be honest, but that's the only track, I'm pretty certain, which has vocals on. I like the back there, it's pretty good, pretty nice. And even the front, if you can work that out, even though it's kind of dark coloured. But yeah, so a decent album if you like that kind of thing. I don't know what else to say, because I've not really listened too much in depth. I picked it up on a bit of a whim. I'm trying to think where it was recommended, and maybe someone just mentioned it to me, and I thought, I'll check that out. Checked out a couple of tracks. I think the opening one was Animus Vox, and I thought, that sounds good. Bad Wings, I heard that one, that sounded good. And then I heard the Between 2 Points. So I've only really listened to 3 tracks before buying the album. So if you like that kind of thing, electronic music, IDM, intelligent dance music. And also I believe it's going to tie me up nicely for the next album. I believe another genre it's classified under is glitch. Which, again, I mean, am I just out of the loop with the kids these days? What's going on? Never heard of glitch music. But it does tie me in nicely to this one, because the next album is called Glitch, and it's by someone called VV Brown. Now, this, I believe, is VV Brown's third album. Now, you can probably see down there as well. It's signed. There it is, on that side. Now, I'm not really massively into autographs, I've got to be honest. Doesn't really do anything for me. It did when I was a kid. I used to love getting things signed by footballers and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, in this day and age, it doesn't really bother me, I've got to be honest. However, the reason why I got this one signed is because this artist, VV Brown, went through a website called pledge.com. I know a lot of artists, a lot of big artists do it these days as well. And it's basically just a way of funding the album, essentially. And also as a purchaser, as a fan maybe of that band or solo artist, you can get nice little extras. So for example, I think it was like an extra £3 or $3, I could get it signed. If you wanted it like a limited edition version, you pay another $10. If you wanted like a lyric sheet to go with it, it's an extra $30 on top of that. So it's a nice way for the artist to make some more money. But for me, I wasn't really bothered about that. But I thought for $3, get it signed. It's a nice little personal touch. Why not? So yeah, VV Brown is basically, what's the best way of describing it again? Well, it's kind of funny actually to describe her, because if you go back, I think it was 2009, her debut album was almost pop sounding, almost. A little bit of kind of slight indie rock in there to a degree, very radio friendly, but I'd say more pop orientated. And I'm not so much sure about the second one. I think the second resembles more this album, which is in places quite dark. It's almost reminiscent, again, in places of Depeche Mode. I know maybe a strange description to use, but it's got that electronic sound again. Trip hop, I believe, is another genre it would come under. But yeah, and also I think she's very kind of avant-garde. She's released 3 singles, which have been Shift, Lazarus, and Sacrifice, and all of them are pretty avant-garde, pretty kind of out there, very artistic. And I think the video to Sacrifice, if memory serves me right, has her, what's the best politically correct way of phrasing this? Dressing up, essentially, as a white person. That sounds racist, but it happens. Check it out. Check the video out. And clearly she's not white, but in the video she does. So it's kind of a powerful message, I think, which is coming across in the video. But yeah, so a decent album, but quite dark, certainly in comparison to her first album, which if you hear a few songs off it, it definitely sounds quite pop-esque. So that's that. Now, 2 albums to go, 2 different bands. The first up is another debut album, nearly dropped it there, by a band called the Jesus and Mary Chain. This one's called Psychocandy. So if you're into a lot of white noise going on, a lot of static energy, very kind of high octane going on, then this is probably your thing. Almost kind of like, well, obviously alternative rock, indie rock, early kind of Manchester scene. Think of Stone Roses and Happy Mondays and Primal Scream and all that kind of stuff. Primal Scream being a band that Bobby Gillespie used to be in. In fact, he was in the band in the Jesus and Mary Chain for this album. And so I definitely say those are the kind of genres it would fit under. Now, the best songs for me, it's got to be Just Like Honey, which is probably their best known track, or from the early era. And then I'd probably say, is April Skies on here? Maybe it isn't. Maybe that was on the next album. I think it was on the next album. So yeah, Just Like Honey, I think is a good one. And what else would I say? Maybe You Trip Me Up. Sowing Seeds. There's a lot of good songs. But I've got to be honest, if you're not really into that kind of shoegazing, heavily distorted kind of guitar effect sound, may not be for you. But quite a pioneering album. And going back to the mid-80s, 1985, I think is when it came out. It was a big deal. And it's funny because, again, coming back to that Erasure story that I said at the start, it's funny how you remember certain things. Because I remember probably around about 1990 or 1991, I was playing football on this indoor kind of football pitch, essentially. It was outdoor, but it was like AstroTurf. And there was this girl was there going by in a Jesus and Mary t-shirt. You know, they probably still make them, obviously, but back in like the late 80s, early mid-90s, they were really popular, where it would have the tour dates on the back of the shirt going down. And I remember seeing the Jesus and Mary chain, and I was only about 12 or 13, and I'd never really heard of them, I've got to be honest, because I was into my pop music and stuff back then. And I just thought the name sounded ridiculous. And I just remember laughing at this girl, not to her face, but me and my friend, we were just laughing, going, the Jesus and Mary chain, they just sound rubbish. But little did I know that several years later, in fact, not many years after that, really, probably by the mid-90s, I knew who they were, and I was a big fan. So this is the first album that I bought, despite being a big fan. Or certainly first vinyl. I must have got 1 or 2 CDs, you know, going back to the mid to late 90s, when I was very, very heavy into buying CDs. So that's that. Now, last but not least, is the 8th studio album by this particular band. Now, it's funny because I had a look online before I made this vid, and I wanted to see what people thought of it review-wise, and it's pretty much a mixed bag, but if anything, it kind of leans more towards negative reviews. That's what I've seen, and the one major criticism that people tended to have with it, to me, is the one that I would have given it, and in fact I will give it, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. And that criticism is basically, it just sounds like all their other records. There's nothing new here, but it's good. And that band is Travis, and the album is Everything at Once. That's the one I showed at the start, by the way, where I asked if you could guess it. You probably didn't. So, yeah, Everything at Once. So, 2016, I like the cover, gotta be honest, with the blue and the kind of the buildings there and the multicolours. So, yeah, for me, Everything at Once. That's the first, is that the first single, I think? 3 Miles High, Magnificent Time, 3 singles there. I like the videos, they're very kind of cartoony, very kind of cheery, I should say. Almost slapstick, a little bit silly about it. But I think it's a decent album, but the only criticism, like I say, is that basically all the songs not so much sound the same, but on this album, but they all sound like they could have fit on a previous Travis album. Is that a compliment? Is it a negative thing to say? I'm not really sure. They don't bring anything new to the table, but what they do well. So, and again, I was watching a couple of interviews yesterday. I think one of them with Fran Healy on BBC News. I think the actual interview went back to like May, June time. And man alive, he looks old now because of his beard and his what little hair he's got left. I guess because he's got it tied back and it's all greyed as well. But yeah, it makes him look at least a decade older. It really does. So, but that's that. But I quite like the album. I think it's a decent album. A lot of people giving it kind of 5, 6 mediocre kind of reviews or scores. I'd probably give it maybe a 7. I think anything less than that I'd feel quite harsh. Anything more than that would probably be too generous. So I think a 7 out of 10. If you like Travis, if you like their previous stuff, something like, if you know the song called Sing, that would basically fit perfectly on this album. It sounds exactly like all the other tracks, basically. But as I keep saying, I know I'm repeating myself, I think that's a good thing. I like Travis. They have or had gone off my radar the last maybe 2, 3, 4 years. But this album is, for me, surprisingly quite strong. You know, one track after the other. And it's only really when it gets towards the end where you start to maybe skip 1 or 2. But it starts off quite strong. But it is same old, same old. But anyway, I'm going to wrap that up. I do apologise for this very rough vid. My first one for a while, so I'm completely out of the loop. And I know for a fact I've stumbled my way through it. But it will improve. Bear with me. It'll improve and I'll get back into the swing of things. So there we are. There's the vinyls, which will be added to the shelf. They don't just stay there. I do listen to them. And that's that. So yeah, thanks for watching. Until my next vinyl vid, which will be next month. Then thanks for watching and I'll see you later. Take care.